The wind was sharp that morning, carrying the dry scent of sand and gunpowder across the wide training range. The sky hung low and heavy, a pale blue stretching endlessly above the golden hills. In the distance, echoes of rifle shots cracked through the silence, one after another, fast and precise. Before we dive into video, please subscribe my channel. At the far end of the range, a group of young German snipers stood proudly beside their rifles. Their uniforms were neat, their confidence even sharper than their aim. Each man laughed as they compared scores, slapping each other's shoulders, teasing about who would miss next. They were the best of their unit, young, fearless, and proud. And then, something unusual happened. An old pickup truck rolled slowly toward the shooting range. Its engine coughed and rattled as if it too had seen better days. When it stopped, the door creaked open, and an old man stepped out. He wore a faded red jacket, a blue cap pulled low over his eyes, and carried a long, weathered rifle case in one hand. His steps were slow, steady, and quiet, like someone walking with purpose, not for attention. The laughter stopped for a second. The snipers turned to look. "Who's that?" one of them asked, squinting in the sunlight. "Probably lost," another replied, chuckling. "Maybe he's here to sweep the floor." The instructor, a tall man with a trimmed beard, frowned slightly. "Leave him be," he said. "Maybe he's from the local town." But the old man didn't look lost. He didn't look confused. He walked straight toward the firing line, his eyes scanning the targets downrange with quiet focus. When he reached the benches, he placed his rifle case carefully on the table. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost ritual-like. The soldiers exchanged smirks. One whispered, "Does he even know where he is?" Another laughed. "Maybe he wants to show us how they used to shoot back in the war." The old man said nothing. He just opened his case. Inside lay an old sniper rifle, long, dark green, and perfectly maintained despite its age. It wasn't shiny or modern like theirs, but it had the kind of look that made men pause, the kind of weapon that told stories of deserts, mountains, and nights without sleep. The instructor raised an eyebrow. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You can't just—" Before he could finish, the old man quietly replied, "I was invited." The instructor hesitated. "Invited by who?" The old man gave a small smile. "You'll see." The young soldiers burst into laughter. "Oh, come on," one said. "Who invited him?" Another added mockingly, "Maybe Santa's army?" The old man ignored them. He adjusted the rifle stand, wiped a small smudge from the scope, and sat down. His hands didn't tremble. His grip was firm and sure, far too steady for his age. The instructor finally sighed. "All right, old-timer. You've got 2 minutes before the next session. Let's see what you've got." The old man nodded once. "That's all I'll need." He leaned forward, closing one eye as he peered through the scope. The world around him seemed to disappear. The laughing, the whispers, even the wind, all faded away. For him, there was only the target, the distant white circle with a red heart in the center. He exhaled slowly, steady and deep. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. And then, boom, the shot echoed across the hills. The bullet struck just shy of the center, cutting the target's edge. "Ha!" one of the young snipers shouted. "Nice try, Grandpa." Laughter erupted again. The old man didn't react. He didn't even blink. He simply reloaded. The second shot came faster. Boom! This time the bullet hit closer, barely an inch from the center. The laughter grew quieter. Some soldiers crossed their arms. The instructor's expression began to change. "Still luck," one soldier muttered. "He can't do it again." The old man's eyes stayed on the target. He whispered something under his breath, words the others couldn't hear. Then he fired again. The third bullet hit dead center. The target jerked slightly under the impact, a perfect shot. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind returned, brushing through the empty silence. The instructor walked closer, studying the man. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. The old man didn't look up. "Somewhere far away," he said softly, "where missing a shot meant more than losing a score." Before the instructor could say anything else, a faint rumble echoed from beyond the hills. Engines. The snipers turned, shading their eyes. 3 black SUVs were driving toward them, fast and disciplined, kicking up dust as they came. "Who are they?" one soldier asked nervously. The vehicles stopped near the range. The doors opened and men in dark uniforms stepped out, their badges marked with a familiar insignia. Delta Force. The laughter was gone now. The German snipers exchanged uneasy glances. The man leading the Delta Force team walked straight toward the old veteran. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his expression was serious. When he reached the old man, he stopped and snapped a sharp salute. "Sir," he said loudly, his voice echoing, "permission to approach the line." Every German soldier froze. The instructor looked from the Delta Force commander to the old man in disbelief. The old man stood, slowly returning the salute. At ease, Commander. The commander turned toward the others. Gentlemen, you're standing in the presence of a man who once trained my unit. Every one of us owes him our lives. The silence was total. No one dared move. The young soldiers stared, faces pale, jaws tight. The instructor swallowed hard. Who is he? The commander's eyes softened with respect. He's the man who took the impossible shot at Kandahar. We call him the Ghost. The old man simply picked up his rifle and said quietly, "Just another day at the range." The sound of the wind filled the air again, and not a single man laughed this time. Dust still hung in the air after the Delta Force vehicles rolled away, leaving behind an uneasy silence. The young German snipers shifted awkwardly, unsure what to say. The old man, calm as ever, stood beside his rifle, eyes fixed on the distant hills. He didn't speak, didn't move. He simply waited. The instructor finally cleared his throat. "All right, everyone. Back to your positions." His voice cracked slightly. "Let's continue the training." But the soldiers weren't focused anymore. They kept glancing at the old man, whispering to each other. "Did you see that salute?" one muttered. "Delta Force saluting him? That can't be real. Maybe they were just showing respect, for old times. Yeah? Or maybe we just embarrassed ourselves in front of someone important." The old man didn't seem to care what they were saying. He sat down quietly, adjusting his rifle again. His movements were patient, slow, and careful, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. One of the younger soldiers, tall and proud, stepped closer. His name tag read Miller. He smirked. "So you're some kind of hero, huh?" he said with a mocking tone. "You think hitting one target makes you special?" The old man didn't look up. He just kept adjusting his scope. Miller's smirk grew wider. "I bet that shot was luck. Maybe your old eyes just got lucky today." The instructor frowned. "Enough, Miller." But Miller wasn't done. "No, sir. I want to see if he can do it again." He turned to the veteran. "How about a little challenge, old man?" The old man finally looked up, his eyes calm but sharp. "What kind of challenge?" Miller grinned. "Simple. You and me. 3 shots each. Whoever hits closest to the center wins. Unless you're afraid." A faint smile touched the old man's lips. "Fear left me a long time ago, son." The instructor sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Miller, this is not—" But the old man raised his hand. "It's all right. Let him shoot first." The soldiers gathered around, excited again. The tension in the air turned into curiosity and pride. Cameras came out. Someone whispered, "This is going to be fun." Miller stepped up confidently, his new sniper rifle gleaming in the sunlight. He adjusted his stance, breathed deeply, and fired. Boom! The bullet struck near the center. An excellent shot. The others clapped and cheered. He fired again. Boom! Another tight hit. 2 for 2, someone shouted. Miller smirked proudly, then aimed for his final shot. Boom! The bullet sliced through the very edge of the red circle. Nearly perfect. He stood up, lifted his rifle, and smiled. "Your turn, old man." The old veteran said nothing. He only sat down, picked up his rifle, and began adjusting it again. His fingers moved slowly, tracing the metal as if it were a memory. The snipers grew restless. "Come on, Grandpa. We don't have all day." Maybe he fell asleep. The old man's face stayed calm, but his eyes told a different story. Deep inside, there was something heavy. A silence that spoke louder than any word. He finally whispered, almost to himself. "Steady hands. Slow breath. 1 shot." He leaned forward, the rifle steady. The world seemed to slow down around him. Even the wind went quiet. Then, boom! The bullet flew straight, cutting through the air and hitting the target's red circle dead center. The laughter stopped. The old man didn't pause. He reloaded, adjusted slightly, and fired again. Boom! The second bullet hit the same hole. Perfect alignment. A few soldiers blinked, whispering, "No way." He reloaded once more. Boom! The third shot landed in the exact same spot, so close that the 3 bullets made a single black mark on the red circle. The entire range went silent. Even Miller froze, staring through his scope in disbelief. The instructor walked slowly toward the target, shaking his head. When he reached it, he placed a hand over the small hole. "All 3, he whispered. "Same spot." He turned around, looking at the old man. "That's impossible." But he turned around, looking at the old man. "That's impossible." The old man finally stood, his rifle in hand. "Not impossible," he said quietly. "Just practiced." The soldiers stared at him, unsure what to say. Then Miller spoke up again, trying to regain his pride. "Fine, nice trick. But anyone can get lucky. Let's make it harder." He pointed toward the distant hills, where a small steel plate glinted in the sunlight. It was nearly a kilometer away. That's 1,000 meters, Miller said. Let's see if you can hit that. The instructor opened his mouth to protest, but the old man was already walking toward the bench. All right, he said softly. Set the target, the soldiers murmured among themselves. No one had ever tried hitting that plate before, not even the best of them. Miller smirked. If you hit it, I'll polish your boots for a week. The old man smiled faintly. You won't have to. He took his position again, lying prone, adjusting his aim carefully. His breathing slowed. His finger rested gently on the trigger. The sun reflected off the scope, flashing for just a second, then disappeared as he fired. Boom! Everyone watched the distant plate through binoculars. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then a faint metallic ping echoed back from the hills. He had hit it. Dead center. The soldiers erupted in shouts, some in disbelief, some in awe. The old man lowered his rifle slowly. Wind's light, he said calmly. About 6 knots from the west. Miller's face turned red. You cheated somehow! The instructor shook his head. No, Miller. That was skill. Pure skill. The old man looked at Miller kindly. Don't be ashamed, son. Skill isn't about age. It's about time. And I've had plenty. He started packing his rifle again, calm and collected. But as he closed the case, the instructor noticed something on the rifle's side. A small engraved symbol. It was faded but clear enough to read, Delta 7 Ghost Unit. His heart skipped. That unit was supposed to be a myth. The instructor took a step closer. Sir, are you? The old man looked up, eyes distant, voice low. Once, a long time ago. And with that he stood and walked away, leaving the stunned soldiers in silence. The wind picked up again, carrying the sound of the distant echo, a reminder of the shot that made every man on that range forget how to speak. The sun had started to slide down behind the distant hills, painting the sky in gold and orange. The shooting range, once filled with laughter, now stood silent. Only the sound of the wind and the soft creak of metal targets could be heard. Every soldier stood frozen, still thinking about what they had just seen. 3 perfect shots, 1 impossible hit, and 1 old man who had turned their pride into disbelief. The instructor slowly walked back from the targets, his boots crunching against the gravel. His eyes were on the old veteran, who was sitting quietly beside his rifle case. He stopped in front of him. That mark on your rifle, he said softly. Delta 7, Ghost Unit. That's not something I've ever seen before. The old man looked up. His eyes were calm, but there was a shadow behind them. You weren't supposed to, he said. The soldiers gathered around, curiosity replacing their pride. What's Ghost Unit? One of them whispered. I think it's a secret team, another replied. No, that can't be real. We would have heard about it. Maybe you were never meant to. The old man stood slowly, brushing the dust from his jacket. You boys talk too much, he said. In my day, silence was part of survival. Muller crossed his arms, still bitter. If you're some legend, prove it. Tell us who you really are. The instructor shot him a warning glance, but the old man only smiled faintly. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. He started walking toward the truck, but the instructor called out, Wait, please. Sir, just tell us something. Anything. The old man stopped. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a low, distant voice, he began. It was 1987, he said. Kandahar Valley. We were pinned down by insurgents. 5 of us, 1 radio. No air support. The soldiers leaned in, silent now. The only sound was the slow hum of the wind. The enemy had the high ground, he continued. We were surrounded. They took out our sniper, and our captain was wounded. Someone had to climb the ridge and take the shot. He paused. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the sun burned red. I volunteered. Not because I was brave, because I knew if I didn't, no one would make it out alive. The young soldiers exchanged quiet looks. The old man's voice was calm, but his words carried weight, the kind that only comes from experience. I crawled 3 miles uphill through dust and rock, he said. Every step felt like the last. I had 1 bullet left. Just 1. He mimed the motion of holding his rifle. The wind was wrong. The light was fading, but I took the shot. He looked at them again, his eyes sharp now. Hit the enemy leader from 400 meters. 1 shot. That's all it took. We made it home. But the mission? It never existed. Not on paper. He gave a small shrug. So they called me Ghost. No one spoke. Even Muller stood quietly now, his arrogance gone. Finally, the instructor said, Sir, why are you here? Why come to this range? The old man smiled softly. Because respect isn't taught in books. It's earned here, he said, tapping the side of his rifle. You boys forgot that. Before anyone could reply, a distant rumble filled the air. Another set of vehicles was approaching. But these weren't military. They were black SUVs, unmarked and moving fast. The soldiers looked at each other, uncertain. The old man sighed. Looks like they found me. Who? The instructor asked. He didn't answer. He just lifted his rifle case and started walking toward the range exit. The SUVs came to a stop. Men in suits stepped out, wearing dark sunglasses and earpieces. Their movements were sharp and professional. One of them, a tall man with gray hair, walked straight toward the veteran. Captain Hale, the man said firmly. You weren't supposed to be here. The soldiers froze again. The name hit like a thunderclap. Captain Hale. The old man turned slightly. I was just visiting. Old habits die hard, the suited man frowned. You know the deal. You're still classified. I didn't say anything, Hale replied quietly. Just told them a story. The man's voice lowered. You told them that story? Hale gave a small nod. They needed to hear it. The agent sighed heavily. Command won't like this. Command hasn't liked me in 40 years, Hale said with a smirk. Behind them, the young snipers whispered among themselves. Captain Hale? That name's in the old files, isn't it? Yeah, but he disappeared decades ago. They said he died in Afghanistan. Guess not. The agent turned toward the instructor. You didn't record any of this, did you? The instructor shook his head quickly. No, sir. Nothing was recorded. Good, the man said, then faced Hale again. Sir, please come with us. There's been some concern about your location. Hale picked up his hat and placed it back on his head. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. Not until I finish what I came here for. The agent frowned. And what's that? Hale looked toward the young soldiers, his eyes steady, to remind them what a rifle is really for. There was silence again. No one dared interrupt him. He turned to Muller, who still looked down, ashamed. You've got skill, son, but skill without respect is just noise. Remember that. Then Hale stepped past the agent, heading back toward the firing line. The agent followed. Captain, you're risking exposure. Then maybe it's time someone remembered what real soldiers looked like, Hale replied. He placed his rifle on the stand again, the old weapon gleaming in the fading sunlight. The soldiers watched, caught between fear and awe. The agent spoke quietly into his earpiece. He's doing it again. Hale adjusted his aim, eyes locked on a target even farther away this time, a small piece of glass glinting on the ridge. You can't even see that, one soldier whispered. Hale's finger rested on the trigger. That's the point, he murmured. Boom. The sound echoed across the valley. The glass on the ridge exploded into dust. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The agent lowered his radio slowly. Still sharp as ever, he muttered. Hale stood, lifting his rifle and walking toward his truck. Still quiet as ever, too, he said, smiling faintly. And just like that, the old ghost walked away, leaving behind a silence that no one dared to break. The sky had turned a deep orange, the last light of day stretching across the hills. The shooting range was quiet now. Even the wind had slowed, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Captain Hale stood near his old truck, his hands resting on the rifle that had once saved countless lives. The young German soldiers watched him in silence. None of them dared to speak. The instructor stepped forward. Sir, you've shown us more than we expected today. But may I ask one last thing? Hale turned slowly. Go ahead. The instructor pointed to the farthest target, a small red flag swaying on top of a distant hill. That's 1 mile out, he said softly. No one's ever hit it. Not once. The old captain smiled faintly. Then let's make it once. The old captain smiled faintly. Then let's make it once. He walked back to the bench, his steps steady and sure. The soldiers followed quietly, forming a half circle around him. Even the agent who had come to take him back stood watching, arms crossed, saying nothing. Hale set his rifle down. The metal glowed under the setting sun. He knelt, adjusted the stand, and looked through the scope. The world around him seemed to fade. The murmurs, the footsteps, the wind. It was just him and the target now. He whispered to himself, one last time. The soldiers watched as he adjusted the focus, calculated the distance, and slowly exhaled. The agent checked his watch, waiting. Hale's finger rested gently on the trigger. Then, boom, the sound rolled across the valley like thunder. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, far away on the hill, the tiny red flag snapped backward. A clean hit. Cheers erupted behind him. The German snipers jumped to their feet, shouting, clapping, unable to believe what they'd seen. The instructor's voice broke through the noise. Direct hit! 1 mile! But Hale didn't move. He just stared down the scope for a few seconds longer, then slowly lifted his head. That one, he said softly, was for the men who never came back. The cheers faded. Silence returned, deeper, heavier this time. The soldiers lowered their eyes, realizing this was more than a demonstration. It was a memory. The agent stepped forward, voice gentle now. Captain Hale. It's time, Hale nodded. I know. He stood, carefully packed his rifle into the case, and placed his cap back on his head. As he turned to leave, every soldier on the range stood at attention. The instructor called out, "Present arms!" All at once, rifles lifted in salute. Hale stopped, looking at them one last time. His tired eyes softened. "Never forget," he said quietly. "Skill fades, glory fades, but respect, that stays." He gave a slow salute, firm, proud, and final. Then he walked toward his truck. The sunset bathed him in golden light as the engine started with a soft growl. The truck rolled forward slowly, disappearing down the dirt road, leaving only dust and silence behind. As the soldiers stood watching, the instructor whispered, "He came as a stranger, and left as a legend." The agent adjusted his glasses, murmuring to himself, "Ghost 7, still the best shot we ever had." The wind picked up again, carrying the faint echo of a rifle shot across the valley. The sound of a man whose aim, like his honor, never missed its mark.